illustrate this, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Dr. Namit Choksi, Chief Executive Officer of Tend Health, who brings strong experience in healthcare strategy, digital health, and scaling delivery model across markets. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, fellow panelists. Healthcare innovation is really at an extraordinary time currently. We can map genomes, we're deploying artificial intelligence, and then we're kind of 3D printing tissues, and yet sometimes patients really struggle to get basic care on time. And so clearly innovation is not the bottleneck, right? And we're at the crossroads of innovation, access, and scale. So if we align all of this, we can transform global health. If we don't, then we're just creating expensive PowerPoint presentations. So with that, let me actually begin with, Richard. As someone who runs a strategy consulting firm, you really sit at the intersection of global product design and local market reality. So how do you navigate that tension between breakthrough innovation and real-world affordability?
Thank you. Really good question. I think, just to paraphrase what you just mentioned, innovation is really accelerating. A lot of people talk about horizon scanning, but I think it's easier and better to think about what's beyond the horizon. In terms of adoption, in answer to your question, it's really about the user. So whilst there is a conscious bias to push technology into market, it's really reliant on that pull by the user, which can be the patient, the clinician, or the surgeon, for example. So what we need to think about is usability, and think about the users and patients, because that's the real acid test as to whether an innovation will be successful or not.
Great answer. And I do think, yes, you're right? Like you want to keep that end user in mind. You want to think about that physician treating the patient as you kind of think about those solutions. Dr. Kumar, India produces world-class scientific talent, but translation from lab discovery to scaled patient impact sometimes remains uneven. Could you tell us a little more from your experience? What is the missing bridge? Is it capital, regulatory, industry collaboration, or simply the inability to kind of navigate these institutional processes?
So in India, when you talk about when people want to scale and kind of transform and innovate, what we lack is that whole ecosystem where kind of, we don't have enough capital in India to kind of even give some support to initial hypothesis which can become a great idea. So capital is definitely there. Regulatory wise, yes, government of India or ecosystem in India has opened up to support innovation in healthcare, especially in terms of drug development we talk about, not in terms of synthetic molecule yet, but slowly government is taking a lot of effort and industry per se, because see, the industry which runs Indian drug development is basically, they are not innovating new molecules, they are just kind of manufacturing the one which is already invented. So where our strength lies in our leads from our own traditional medicine, where you have practice-based evidence. So see, we have a lot of herbs, almost 6,500 herbs in India, which has already documented in classical texts of Indian medicines, having some impact. So I think it is right time for us to kind of go deeper into reverse pharmacology, what you talk about, that there is a lot of evidence of its use in India as well as subcontinents. So when you talk about Indian medicine, it is all subcontinent of India, which is a bigger part, and including China having a strong herbal tradition where they have shown that how they can integrate with their traditional as well as conventional medicine can go hand in hand. So I think that model at some point of time should become a kind of a cornerstone for developing new innovation. through reverse pharmacology approach, what we say. And then add, today, of course, AI and other technologies have to fast-pace the drug discovery process and create a very strong evidence for. See, today, India has numbers. See, when you do a clinical trial, numbers are not issue, or the variety of diseases in India is not issue. This also the whole mechanism of tapping this information. So we have not developed a facility, whether it is infrastructure, clinical research infrastructure, labs are there, but basically run by government and other institutions with high excellence. But also, when you say MedTech or these softwares and other things which can integrate all the different trials at same time and do a high scale clinical trial at same time. So these network and this ecosystem is required for us to go to the next level.
That's a great answer. So what you're really saying is, A, look inward as much as you're looking outward. Look at our traditional approaches, but also try to couple them with all that exists in new tech, right? Like combine AI, so try to get best of both the worlds. I would deviate a little bit, and Ms. Garima, I would love to kind of, you are working on a breakthrough technology with a company that you're a part of. I really, as we think about, companies that ensure breakthrough technologies, how do you ensure that the underserved population is also served without kind of widening those inequities? I remember you just mentioned the free trade agreement is going a long way and now helping scale access to your tech. But what are some of those things? If you could shine some light on that.
So thanks, Dr. Namit, and thank you all at the GEC to bring in. First, as Dr. Namit shared about innovative technology, let me take one moment to share about it on this platform. I head the India business for Paxman scan cooling, that's for the oncology patients, which helps to prevent chemotherapy-induced hair loss. So this particular innovative technology, so probably even for the entire MedTech, as in healthcare for India, this question would, stand for everyone as a comment. Because as he rightly said, that inequities, how to fight the inequities. I'm very grateful to our Prime Minister to sign the FTA with the UK, right, so that the accessibility increases, point one. But the accessibility increases, now we need to look on the other point, that is on the insurance increases for the healthcare. Yes. So now what we are taking the leverage as we stand today in the 100 hospitals plus, we stand today because of the, coming up with the FTAs and all. We look forward for the insurance companies to support the oncology perspective, to support the medical technology user. As you are always, talking about the end user as a question. The end user should get the benefit to use that innovative and get the accessibility to that expensive international medicine or a medical technology. So the end user will benefit only once you have better insurance in place. And let's see in coming future we go through it.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. I'm really hoping that India does move to that value-based care model, and I think you're right that everyone in that ecosystem, payers, providers, patients, everyone really needs to kind of come in together to kind of bridge these gaps in healthcare access, right? I think at the intersection of innovation. Richard, if I can go back to you a little bit, we are seeing AI in diagnostics and precision medicine and in next generation devices. How do we really ensure that innovation does not widen the gap between tier 1 hospitals and rural populations? I mean, you come from the UK. NHS in some ways is a beautiful healthcare ecosystem. It's based on the principles of equity and equality. If you could, tell us a little more, and how do you think about it as someone who helps a lot of product development efforts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think inequality is the key word there. So whilst we mentioned earlier that technology is rapidly accelerating, in some cases that platform does require a technology. At the moment there are lots of apps based on smartphones which is accessible. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of the community can access it. So this is something that, if we go back to kind of pre-COVID, there's been a real shift in terms of patient engagement with services, for example, apps. And what that's done is it's mobilised people to feel comfortable using apps to manage their own healthcare. But as you mentioned, it can potentially create a gap between those that can afford it and those that can't. And the issue here from an ethical standpoint is how do we incorporate those people that are socio-economically challenged and deprived to also receive the same amount of healthcare. And I think it's an ongoing debate, but it's something that we should be aware of in terms of how do we standardise healthcare across different systems. Yeah, I don't have a magic answer right now, but it's something strategically that we should be aware of. I mean, the good thing about technology, though, particularly with smartphones, is it is more accessible than it was. I think it's how it's managed and deployed. So, for example, you know, if an app, if a service is developed through an app, then if that's monetized, it means that whilst the person can access the app, they can't actually afford the healthcare. And that might be where government forces come into it. Yeah.
Great. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I want to just add on this because we are working on this. That see, many a times when you talk about high-end technology and medical innovations, we talk about genomics, we talk about gut microbiome and all, which is really not affordable for a common person. But this is where I think computer vision sensors and are coming into act. And we are working with IIT Mumbai right now to develop a kind of two-layered system where we are doing a large-scale computer vision data capturing for the patients with specific diseases and a sample data which is representative of that particular subcategory of diseases who can afford or whom we can give all these high-end tests of phenotype analysis, gut microbiome, and this is statistically representative of that data set. So what happens is, in due course of time, when this data sets becomes larger, so just by using computer vision or some kind of small affordable sensor at a primary healthcare center in a village of India, you can replicate a similar kind of outcomes in terms of either diagnosis or prognosis or in terms of predicting the response to the therapy by this dichotomous approach where a sample, when we are using very simple statistical thought process in that. So if you have 1,000 patient, a representative 120 patient can give you a very strong signals of efficacy, but the larger population you can use affordable technology to get same kind of outcomes. So this is something which would be very important in Indian context because you have numbers here and you have also varieties, like you are talking about tuberculosis. Yeah. For India it is a public health challenge, but for example now you talk about Alzheimer's. Now Alzheimer's in West is a big problem, public health issues, but for India it may not be right now. But what is interesting to note that in India even as 1% population of Alzheimer's is equivalent to a bigger population in West. So we have that sample size. The main thing which we'll have to focus on is, can we start documenting into the right platform, create robust data and a very solid protocol-based evidence. If we can do it, we can add a lot to many of these healthcare challenges utilizing our population and diversity as well as technology.
That's a great insight, right? Like, I mean, what I'm hearing is, again, like you talk about ways to make that accessible for everyone, and as a country, we are very aspirational. So why not aspirational in affordability in healthcare?
Yeah, and this is also kiosk model what we are talking about. See, if a person who wants a small booth, see, this all was inspired by telephone booth. India was probably one of the initial telephone revolution when it happened, telecom revolution it happened. It was a phone booth. Right now we don't have phone booth, but a similar kind of low kind of investment driven booths, which is started in China, where in China you see a lot of train stations and other having a preliminary kind of health kiosk. So this is a very important that how can we in Indian context make it affordable, very simple, and then give a better primary as well as secondary healthcare responses to the people.
No, and I think you bring up a very beautiful point. I actually work with a startup that builds out these kiosks, and AI will not replace doctors, but it really just supplements the doctors, right? So now, as a physician, I would have 500 patients in a day, that 3 residents have to see. And each patient is taking 20 minutes. With the help of that kiosk, all of the history is available to me. So I save 10 minutes per patient, so now my productivity goes up, right? My thinking ability goes up. So it really supplements and it develops at that primary healthcare level. And I think Richard touched onto this, right? Like how it's very important for these technologies to help the end user, but also that entire vertical, right? Like physicians, patients, also investors. Richard, one more question for you before I go to Garimaji is, let's address this core tension, really. When we think about innovation, access, and scale, pull in all different directions, which one should win?
Just repeat those 3.
When we think about innovation, access, and scale, when we think about that in all directions, which one should win?
Access.
Very good.
The reason for that is that anybody can innovate. Successful innovation requires very strong leadership and knowledge. Access, i.e. accessing the market, the patients, the surgeons, the clinicians is the key. Because if you can't get access, then there's no point in the other 2 that you mentioned in that category.
Very beautifully said. But Richard, if I can ask you to, I know we were having this conversation where we were talking about, a very interesting connect between leadership and innovation and scaling. Could you shine a little more light on that as you think about consulting people and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So we're all innovators in this room. We've all got really good ideas, and we want to kind of commercialize them. But to commercialize innovation is incredibly difficult. Successful innovation is probably 1% the actual idea itself. I think a lot of people think that because they've got a good idea, that will enable it to succeed. But the things that hang off that are leadership, intellectual property, monetization, technology obsolescence, process. There are lots of things that can compromise what is a good idea, and leadership is key to this. So I've got an MSc in leadership. I'm really interested in how innovation and leadership are very, very closely related, and how my company, for example, is all about navigating clients, whether it's a startup or a global MedTech, and how we effectively get them to the right place at the right time. Innovation is risky business. R&D can be expensive, particularly within MedTech because of the time and money resource. So it's really important to effectively get those projects delivered on time, or indeed to kill them early, because lots of people have a technology bias because it's a great idea. They think that it will be adopted. So my kind of comment on that is, your user is only interested in what it does, not what it is.
Thank you. Garimaji, if I may ask you, since you work for a private company, and how do you really balance or optimize for equity, access, whilst optimizing shareholder returns, right? Like you have a boss one, so you have to prove your numbers at some point for companies to be sustainable. So how do you think about private companies really optimizing, for all of this?
So yeah, that's a quite wonderful question at the right time when the budget has come up for India. Okay, so before the budget implementation is coming in. So coming from the perspectives of MedTech, the private, yes, they do invest a lot in these because the prevalence of the indication is increasing. So the opportunities increases for them. So looking at the prevalence of any of the clinical indications, the private investments does happen to a higher extent. Point 2 is about where are we reaching and to which target audience. Okay, because the target audience should be clear on that. It's about the accessibility, as we are just talking about the same points, where and how we are reaching. Because now India, why Paxman UK has, been so focused for India. We are working across for 60 countries worldwide. But why focusly for India? Having only 100 over here. The prevalence of oncology is higher in India. So that makes the base for any of the private investors to look forward. And likewise, as you shared that, yes, what returns I'm going to give. Because I'm sitting in a geography where I've got 28 countries itself. Yeah, so looking at population across, I have the higher margins, I have the higher, way of promotions. Yeah, I've got the higher target audience. So the number is higher, and of course the returns will be higher. But yes, accessibility is still the way. How to reach the regulatories. Yeah. So once the regulatory is in place, the market improves, and thereby the investors or the returns comes out.
I see. Great way to answer that, and maybe I'm a little biased towards it because I'm a healthcare investor myself, right? So as I think about people talking about access and scaling, as an investor, I always think about, okay, but in order for all of this to be sustainable, you also need someone who's going to put in money, and the only way that person is going to put in money is that they expect those returns, and those returns must beat, other systems. So
that's the reason, Dr. Namit, I just said that union budget has just come out, and in union budget, almost 17 drugs have got duty free for import.
oh wow.
So from therein you can gauge that what is India market towards, and that is where we are sitting at this global economic platform to discuss this and why India should be invested in.
Yeah, no, and we should thank our Prime Minister for his futuristic vision.
Yes.
Really, in terms of, again, like building that access, right, and thinking about it as we kind of plan, and keeping that end user
In mind. That's the reason the healthcare companies, like 17 drugs of import, have gone under the duty-free access. With the FTA, the MedTech devices are coming duty-free. So that will just support the Indian market as well. And alongside Dr. Namit, there is also one point to be added here, is the medical tourism in India. Why medical tourism? There are so many MEA patients coming towards India. Why they look forward for Indian facility for medical health care? Because of the accessibility.
Yeah.
You see, there are so many patients from Saudi, from MEA, that they look forward to India to come for their healthcare checkups or for their any chronic treatments, whether it is cancer, neurology, or cardiac. Because we have the best accessible international drugs, international technologies, and this is the reason why we
and no wait times. So as someone
And
who's
no wait
part of the
time.
NHS or in the US, wait times are always challenging, and that kind of is important as we kind of think about access. Dr. Kumar, as we try to wrap things up, one of the questions that I really have for you is, as someone who has been a researcher, as someone who has also been in leadership positions to try to scale access, what frameworks do you think are needed to ensure that these diagnostics and treatment innovations remain ethical, inclusive, and also patient-centric? I know that you hinted a bunch towards how you think about patient centricity, affordability, etc. If you could chime in a little more on that, it'd be very helpful.
So I think India has to take the thought leadership in health also. So we talk about, of course, people who are sick. So the whole world is looking towards P5 medicine, what we call as personalized preventive. So see, a bigger part of the healthcare is to prevent disease. Okay, we can build hospitals for people who are sick, but what about preventing diseases?
Sure.
And India has to take that thought leadership and has to scale up these concepts which are there in traditional Indian medicine or maybe Southeastern medicine as such, to give a model to the world where we can prevent disease. We can personalize the intervention. It's all about holistic medicine, where we talk about holisticity and multidisciplinarity, or integrative oncology with a lot of integrative, because it's not just about giving medicine to a person, but a person as a whole who is suffering from disease has social issues, has psychological issues, has emotional issues, and many other things which we have to manage in a patient. So unless and until India does not develop, because see, our scale of problem will be much bigger. See, when your population is big, if you just rely on one discipline or one method of handling our healthcare challenges, it cannot be. And I say is because India economically is not a kind of a developed country, it's a developing country. So the model which you develop for India-centric approach has also a lot to give to the whole world, because said and done, even the developed nation, they have mental health issues.
Yep.
Are we able to cater that? So I think India needs to develop healthcare model and create pilots with good evidence, good data-driven, hardcore, good quality researches. May not mean molecule, but in methodologies, protocols which can give a better health care to the whole world. And that is where I see is very important for us to take the leadership and thought leadership in particular. And then scale the model for different strata. So even if you don't have money, you are in a village in India, still you are able to manage cancer.
Yes.
And of course the subsidies and other things helps. But the said and done, if you look at COVID, whatever said and done, the mortality was not as high as what so-called developed nation had. Why? Because we had an inherent method of addressing these challenges through our own healthcare system, which was developed indigenously. So at some point of time, a lot of investment, research has to go into building and scaling up. Then at Tier 3, Tier 2, as well as developed cities of India first, and of course developed world. I think by nature, India has an ethos of catering to everybody. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, when you say, see, we create models for everybody, not exclusivity where accessibility is only for select few.
No, that I think Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam sums it up really well, right? Like we must design for the world. I'm gonna wrap this up real quick, and when I say I feel like innovation is not the bottleneck here. Alignment is, we don't lack intelligence, we don't lack capital, we don't lack technology, we lack integration across incentives, right? And so, to sum it up, the way I think of it is the future of healthcare will not be defined by who builds the smartest device, but by who designs systems that will allow that to reach everyone, right, and kind of build access. So with that, I thank you all for participating and for sharing all these insights. It was great being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for moderating this session so well and getting a discussion panelist. Thank you for sharing all the insights. I would request you all to please step forward so that we can get a good group picture. So coming to the next, we have the last session, and post that, we'll be having our gala dinner at 7:30. We'll be announcing in which hall we'll be having the dinner tonight. So I request you all to please stay with us.